I just want to remind you that you're going to crush it today.
Yo, welcome back to the lab. I'm your host, Elias Benjaloon. Join me as we dive into the science behind the hustle of badass entrepreneurs working smarter, not just harder. In every experiment, we're going to dive in on business tactics and life lessons, enjoy some hip hop, and experience a moment of gratitude. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's win this digital revolution together. As always, we're going to kick things off with some dope music, so I'll see you in there. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the lab in this episode of the Hustle Science Experiment. I'm super stoked. I've got Sercan Topcu. He is the co-founder of Tembo Education. He is a research associate at Lightbend. He's also a 30 under 30 Forbes recognized entrepreneur. That's incredible. Sercan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Elias, and thank you for having me. Absolutely, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited. I mean, you've got some really cool topics we're going to dive into. How about, before we get into the educational stuff, we kick it off. Tell me, how did you become an entrepreneur in the first place?
Honestly, that journey probably started in middle school by what I've seen around me in my environment, which is one of the reasons I was one of the co-founders of Tembo Education. Education is a big part of my life that I care about. And it's very simple, actually. Like most people, I'm going to kind of do a quick recap. Born and raised in Turkey, both parents working. So when they were both working, I was under the discipline of my grandma. As you can see, no matter where you are from in the world, you don't actually skip that. Grandma's always discipline you when you're little. But from there, what happened was my dad was a Navy officer and he had a NATO work. So we went to Italy in middle school. And when that happened, it was really interesting because I get to see basically a whole environment, atmosphere of cultures that intertwine with each other and had to collaborate with each other. And keep in mind, I'm in middle school. I'm in 5th grade. So I don't have any kind of bias or preconceived notions of what country's politics are, what people from that country should look like, feel like, talk like. So from that perspective, when I got into that environment, it really changed my notion of what just people are. And when I came back to Turkey, that approach actually helped me kind of work towards what I wanted to do. So I started presenting Turkey in more European Parliament, in more United Nations, in places like Warsaw, Poland. But after about 2 years, I started recognizing my character changing. So I kind of felt like I needed a wake me up, so to speak, and being in love with hip hop. Ever since I was a kid, nice. I quite grasped some of the things that was happening in the music. Did that make sense? I didn't see the type of differentiation or discrimination that was described in the songs.
Okay.
In a completely different world. And for me, everything was global. So I actually became an exchange student in high school and went to Brooklyn High as one of the 18 kids coming from Turkey and stayed in Southside Jamaica, Queens in 2005, New York. So I was a pasty Middle Eastern kid.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun because I learned a lot of things and I realized some of the things that is still a hot topic today when it comes to discussions. And from there, one of the biggest things, by the way, those people stay in your life in a very interesting manner. I still stay in touch with them. I still can't get over how good Haitian
was the program. That sounds pretty incredible and really, another, experience, another young experience to experience the world, Italy in middle school and then in high school, come to America. That's pretty crazy.
It is. And I can tell you this, when the high school thing happened, right? Middle school was more so because my dad had to leave. So we had to figure out whether we're going to go with him or not.
Okay.
And high school was more so I was looking for opportunities. And that's one of the biggest things that I want to share about that. You don't necessarily need financial support from, your close encounters. You can find programs that can do that for you if you bring in the right kind of mindset and value for what they want to accomplish with their program. So that is one of the reasons that I realized early on, if I want to go get something done somewhere else on the planet, there will be an opportunity. I just need to make sure if I'm right for it and how can I get right for it. So that in itself was just an interesting learning experience. Absolutely. And from there, as you can imagine, coming back to Turkey, I was like, okay, So I'm back in it again. And in Turkey, because of what I've loved about United States, I used to play basketball and started playing American football in Turkey. So it was just a very interesting element of like, I had to keep a part of what I've gotten from there.
Right.
And then through that, what's interesting is, as you can imagine, after some time, I started getting that notion of like, I gotta get out. Like, this has become too monotonous. There's not a lot of diversity in opinion, and we're just, it's the circle of life. You're talking about the same things because it's the same people and all that kind of stuff. So I actually decided to leave again, became the first Erasmus scholar from the engineering department to go to Portugal. So I, went to Portugal, Lisbon. That was a great experience. Never knew it. Like, there's just so much you can learn about life and people. And then after that, as you can imagine, like kind of getting the story, I went back to Turkey again. Having been an industrial engineer, I realized I could see the end of the barrel. And I think that's a most common thing or a theme between entrepreneurs, no matter where you're from, is once you see that end of the barrel, and I was like, okay, so I'm probably going to work as an engineer for 3 years, slay Excel dragons, and then maybe promotion. If I have a girl, I might get engaged and then might get married. If I get a pay raise, I have a kid. And next thing you know, I'm like, oh my God, this next 30 years, like this can't be that simple. Like, so I realized I want to change the direction of my life. And I decided looking for opportunities in the United States. Nobody took me seriously as a marketer or a salesperson in Turkey, because given that I was an industrial engineer, even though I did do marketing and sales and took people to spring festivals and winter festivals in college, they didn't care for that. So I wanted to kind of realign my livelihood with my passion and deal with people versus just numbers. And that's how I ended up in Tampa, in Florida. And I came here to get my master's in marketing. And ever since, it's been a great journey, man.
That's incredible, man. How are you loving Florida?
This is going to sound weird, but I have this very interesting love relationship with Florida sky. Like, I wish people can get a moment to enjoy Florida sky sometimes. It's very different, very beautiful.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I lived in Florida for a few years. It's definitely a really beautiful place. Your story is incredible, man. It definitely highlights the power of traveling and how traveling can open you up to new cultures and could really be like life-changing, change your perspective of the whole world. So definitely, I think it's super incredible that you're able to do it at such a young age, right? So since super young, you've experienced all of these different cultures. I'm sure that has definitely fueled your ongoing entrepreneurial journey right now. I'm curious, tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now and, what you're expecting, what you've got to come.
Absolutely. So like you said, through all that travel, I actually didn't recognize it back then, but I'm recognizing more so, and I've seen the benefit of it, reap the fruits of it in the process. I've gotten an interesting element of analytical thinking and human behavior. So because of that, what I've been able to do is, and I know you and I chatted about this, the first job that I had in the United States, just like anybody else, I had to kind of hustle, right? That you have to kind of put your hand in the dirt. So the first job I had was door-to-door sales of kids' books in West Virginia. So that was an interesting experience. I learned that I was entitled for a lot of things based on my perception of who I was in the world and what I've done for myself up to that point. So once I got that practice of realizing, okay, there's some things that I can learn from a 19-year-old, there's some things that I can learn from a 70-year-old, doesn't matter disparity. And from that moment on, I came back, worked as a campaign manager for a direct marketing company in big retail houses. Through that time frame, I also learned the difference between how US defines hard work and how my culture in Middle East defines hard work. We usually look at the clock, not necessarily the output. That's
okay.
it. So from that moment on, I realized, okay, there are certain things that I'm gaining here that if I can establish a value for myself and stay here, I'm more than going to be able to actually reap the benefits of that value in a higher ground if I go back somewhere else. So I decided to stay here as much as I can. And obviously the struggle is very real and it does cost quite a bit of a penny. But during that time frame, something interesting happened. And that changed the course of my life completely. I was actually looking at a pamphlet at school. And the reason I'm saying that is not everything is on social media immediately, right?
Okay.
So there's some things that might be of value that might just be in written word, and you might just want to actually experience it at that moment. I saw a pamphlet and it said, you want to compete for $1 million. And I was like, I know how MLMs work. I don't want to fall into that structure. And then 2 weeks later, my mentor was like, that's actually real. And so when I went in, it was this worldwide social enterprise competition. It still is the world's largest social enterprise competition, called the Holt Prize. And the challenge that was at hand was providing education to 10 million children by 2020. And this is 2015. And they wanted people like us, just business people from school, to compete. So if you had a business idea, they can scale, sustain, and be able to actually innovate in that process, because you need to reach 10 million children in 5 years. Great. They're accepting your business plan. And so I was like, okay, this is an interesting thing. Having seen the importance of the background of education and how that plays a role into how I grew up, I was like, this is it. Like, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And I wanted to give it a go. And taking that first step, right? Like we always talk about, opportunity knocks on the door. You just got to sometimes make sure that you take that step to actually go to the door. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a go. So I was working 10-hour days, was a master's student in the meantime, and then would come meet with the group at 10:30 at night, maybe go till 5:30 in the morning every single day, until we made it to a point where we're like, okay, this is exactly what we want out of this. And thankfully, through that hard work, we were able to win the regionals. We went to the world finals, and that's where I like that accolade that you talked about. I became the world's, I'm still the only Turkish citizen that is able to make it to the world final stage for the world's largest social enterprise competition. And that's one of the major steps in us becoming Forbes under 30 entrepreneurs. And that definitely was a key role. And from there, I realized, okay, hard work, alignments, right? It sounds like a great story, but like, you know, every entrepreneur has their tough time. So when I'm doing this, I had to leave work, my day job at some point, but I realized I was burning too fast, too quick, right? When it comes to my financial resources. So I was like, I need a job that can get me something so I can get rid of my expenses, maybe just even, but work on building the business. And so I needed something where like that wasn't during the day, because I had to go present, I had to go to competitions and all that kind of stuff. And then at the same time, it should have been enough money. So guess what I chose? I decided to do commercial cleaning. So I cleaned banks between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. and then did the startup journey for the rest of the day. So, and it was funny because the reaction that I got from my entrepreneurs in the United States, they were like, oh, that's smart. But the reaction I got from my friends in Turkey, they're like, what the hell? You got your master's in the United States. You did that.
Oh, man.
You go to clean banks. Like, it was just so interesting.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely could see that like crazy different perspective, even between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs, right? Like,
yeah, true that. True that.
Well, man, that's definitely, you know, quite a few years of hustle and dedication. You know, I looked at your LinkedIn, and one of the recommendations was, you know, Sercan is an individual that's persistent, and, you know, based off your story, that's 100% true. And, you know, congratulations on all the success, the Forbes 30 under 30 and the growth of a tech education company. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And now your work at Lightbend. I'd love to open up the floor. You know, you're our guest, like, professor of the day for Hustle Science today. So what is the business tactic that we're diving into?
Absolutely. So there are two things that I really care about. And as you know, from my story, I care about human behavior more so than anything. And I think that's the first indication you're going to look as a marketer or a salesperson, right? Those are the people that I probably will be more helpful for in this, what I'm sharing. Mm-hmm. But so the number one thing that I would suggest, and it's really hard to do because scientifically 70% of our rational decisions are actually irrational because we just base it off of preference and past experience. But it's very important to make sure that you don't come to things with bias or assumption, especially nowadays. Back in the day, paradox of choice was the lack of information or the lack of access to information, right? You had to go somewhere to find something. Nowadays, it's everywhere. Information is ubiquitous, right? So you can't just go like, well, this is true, and people can check it whenever they want to. But the paradox of choice is the right information at the right time. When people are looking for that information, do you have tools? We have technology to be able to indicate that to us. So if we have that indication, we need to just make sure, we need to confirm or deny that indication as an assumption, right? So one of the biggest things I would suggest is making sure that once you get that your data from your tools, your technology, your tech stack, and you're building all these beautiful campaigns with demographic and psychographic information, that's all fine and dandy. Yes, absolutely, right? But when you're in the point of conversion, or when you're in the point of consideration for your business, for your product, for your service, don't take what is given to you as data, as gospel. Start to question the why behind that data and see if you can actually get to the true cause of the challenge that they're facing, because more than likely they might say something, but it might be based off of something completely different. And then once you identify that is when you actually truly establish real value that can go on for years. And that's when you build your book of business in a strong way.
Awesome. That's incredible. I think you've definitely touched on a lot of really high level topics that we can kind of dive deeper into. Can you share some of the context of like the applications that you use this in, like whether it's like in direct marketing space or that's in paid media or another approach? I'm curious to see, you know, what those applications are like.
Absolutely. So the number one application I can say is lead generation, demand creation, right? Everybody's on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram all the time trying to build leads, right? But you can tell, and I'm sure you're getting these messages too, where like, it's just so easy to read the fact that you're looking for information, you're looking for data, and you're just spraying. Hopefully one sticks. And sometimes it's urgent for people, so they will jump on it.
Yeah.
But in my mind, there's a better way of doing things, which is, yeah, do that if you want to, sure. That might be a part of your strategy, no problem. But also identify your top prospects, right? And when I say prospects, I'm talking about customers, clients, employees, management, like whatever the objective is, what is the top prospect for that objective, right? And that is called the Pareto law, because 80% of your returns are going to come from the top 20% of your participants.
Yeah.
Which is why it's important to make sure that for those top 20, you spend the effort of understanding their intentions and their whys behind their movements. One thing that might help individuals and those who are listening to kind of get into this mindset is Simon Sinek. His golden circle is a great indication of why this type of thinking is a great way of delivery in messaging, because if you can get in your mind how to think like this, then you will speak like this as well over time. And that is a better connection.
Right. I mean, it's about identifying the values of the people that you want to work with. And when you engage with them, you engage with like that values first approach. Absolutely. Tons of marketers, whether it's like on LinkedIn or Facebook ads or whatever, take a very much like 1970s approach to advertising still, right? And it's like, I'm just going to push this message out there and 5% of the market needs this right now and I'm going to do business with them, you know? But like in a world of the internet where everything, you know, is alive all of the time, everything you put out can be seen by anybody. Like you need to be way more thoughtful about the relationships that you're building. And if you're thinking about the long term of the business, like don't focus on the 5% or 1% of the market that needs you right then and there. Think about how you can nurture the relationships with a much bigger segment of the market and understand like this, you know, outside ring of, you know, potential people you could be working with. They're not ready and they'll probably be annoyed when you said to them, hey, what's up? Do you need a website? Like that's not cool. You know, you burn that relationship down. So yeah, I agree.
So true.
100%
So true.
with all of that, man. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
And I would finish with this. So to be able to do that, people need to kind of go internal a little bit in the beginning. And this is like a how-to, so to speak, to get into that kind of a mindset of work frame. There are three things that, and this is like, you know, my story. And for those that are actually listening, from all of that door to door, right? And the indirect marketing in Costco and the entrepreneurship story and all of the Fortune 500 consultancies that I do, there's only one thing that still stays true. Every single day, I make sure I spend some time in the morning for myself to understand how I'm going to control my work ethic that day. I'm going to control my attitude that day, and I'm going to control my motivation of what I want my objectives and results to be that day. Those are the three things I can control. Because besides that, I don't know who was having what kind of a day. We might have had the best relationship, but then things have gone AWOL for their life, and now they're just pissed off at me because they need somebody to vent to. You don't know
Right.
what's going on. So controlling your own is very important to be able to control the conversation of what's happening in real time. And that's the same mentality in marketing. Like if you can't control your messaging because you can't control internally your motivation, your work ethic, your attitude, which defines how you deliver something, then it's not going to make sense to people, or it's just not going to be something that they like or would like to get engaged with. And that's the key. To me, that's the key to be able to have no bias or no assumption, is making sure you control those three variables that you can definitely control in your life.
Absolutely. I love that. And actually, I was thinking about this the other day about like how you have to kind of be aware of your own perception when dealing and working with people. And when you become aware of your perception and you realize, oh, something that may be emotionally triggering to you may not be something at all, right? And you like just, move forward objectively and like you said, control your messaging, then you're much more in control of the conversation and in control of like how you're going to move all of these relationships forward, as opposed to like relationships eventually imploding or exploding because you're not, you're struggling with that. Like you have to be good at managing relationships in order to be good at business.
Absolutely. And Elias, like I couldn't have said it better, controlling the messaging. One thing that I want people to understand is there's a difference, because I've also met with these kinds of individuals where they don't believe in the honesty and integrity or transparency of the type of market space that we're in, the type of work that we do, right? People are also afraid. There's that side too. They're like, you know everything about me through data. I don't want to trust you because I know you can manipulate me. So from that standpoint, one of the biggest things that I would make sure for those who are listening to us, when we're talking about the frame of controlling, we're talking about controlling the conversation, right? Think of like Hansel and Gretel. Just little breadcrumbs in the conversation to make sure there's direction towards what you're trying to say, so that you're always on the same page, because what you're saying and what people are hearing might be different things. That's what we mean by it. We're not trying to control other people's minds or their decisions.
Yeah.
None of that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just watching the Cambridge Analytica documentary on Netflix. I don't know if, they were talking about this issue over and over again. I'm sure we could dive a whole ton into this some more, but I think we've like packed a lot of value, which is incredible. So thank you. That was super informative and really important for people to understand, especially. And I think like, you talked on it from a high level, but this is stuff that is you need to like be considering in your direct messaging and talking to people and your Facebook ads and all that. I want to segue now into our moment of gratitude. We do this every single time because, as you know, in the entrepreneurial space, a lot of people look for that external validation. I just want to like shut that space up and be like, hey guys, you don't need that external validation. It's all within you. You got this. You got to believe in yourself. And, a big part of like getting that energy is being grateful for everything that you already have, as opposed to like looking for that external validation in life. So what are you feeling particularly grateful for today, Sercan?
I'm feeling grateful for the opportunity of having to share my experience with people that actually want to listen to it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I love that. Piggybacking on it, like I'm feeling grateful that we're having this conversation. There's so many people that are so open and willing to like, give back and like create this valuable educational content, collaborate, do all these really cool things. So I'm grateful for, the world being an abundant place when you just go out there and connect with people. Let's go into the life lesson of the day, man. You've got tons of experiences. What life story do you want to share with us?
I would say the one thing that I'll take with me is, and I actually heard Eddie say his name in his podcast too. I had the fortune of having to attend Richard Branson's conversations and be able to ask him questions. One of the biggest things that I learned from him that I think is a great life lesson is break the conversation barrier. Because conversation happens two ways, right? It's a two-way street. He's not saying learn how to speak. He's not saying learn how to talk, learn how to meet. He's saying have a conversation, which means you gotta listen. Right? If we can break that barrier and actually listen to each other with no bias or assumption, and then be able to deliver with the things that we can control, I feel like most of the conversations that are either bipartisan or polarizing won't be as dramatic as it is. And it is so true for business too. That way it will be a smoother transition into where you want to go with your conversation and attain that value versus trying to send 50,000 emails and, trying to just get in front of their face, because they would want to listen to you from afar too.
Right.
That's the thing. Break the conversation barrier. Know how to handle the conversation, how to have one, a true one.
Right. Yeah. You have to be listening to, people, because they're going to be telling you their needs and their wants, right? And if you're just ignoring that at the service level and just going in with your kill of whatever you think is the message to convert them, well, there's a huge disconnect because you haven't heard them out in the first place. And that's true in like personal relationships too. That's not like just a business thing. It's like a core relationship thing. Is there, like, when do you feel like you kind of made that connection in your life where like, oh my gosh, wait a second. Because you were in direct sales before, like, did you come at it from like the standard salesperson in the beginning? Like sell, like put it, like, were you one of those guys? I mean, I was.
Yeah, I was.
So when was it that like you made the connection? You're like, there's a different way for this to like work.
When I saw the difference between the margins of people selling in the right way versus just trying to hit quota.
Okay.
The biggest difference. That was when I've seen the impact that it can have, because people trusted the suggestions and consultancy of someone that built that relationship, had that conversation capability, over someone else who's just like, you need this? Actually, yeah, I do. Give me 2. Okay, done.
Right.
That's it. That it's done with. I don't know if you're going to come back to me. I don't know if I can get those 2 repeat again. I don't know if I can add another one on top of that again. So that's why I realized the longevity of success in anybody's life, like you said, personal or professional, does have to come from being able to handle a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that, man. And that difference, by the way, was that like a 10x difference? Did you feel like that was a 1000x difference, or? Oh man.
I can easily say it was a 200% bump. From numbers that I can remember within the timestamp that at least for that job, definitely, it was a 200% bump.
Okay. And then, I hear this among especially billionaires. Billionaires talk about this all the time, which is like, it's always focused on the impact and the why, and it's never really focused on the what, right?
Yep. And again, that comes from, like I said, like if you don't know the why, how are you going to have a real conversation with someone?
Yeah.
About his products, colors, features, sizes, like none of that is a benefit to anybody's life. There's a difference between usage and verbiage.
So I just want to like, before, we cap this off, got a question since we've talked about it so much, Sercan, and it's one of those cheesy questions. We're gonna throw it at you anyway. What's your why?
I want to leave this planet with something that's bigger than my name. And for me to be able to enjoy that process, I do want to be able to retire early, so be able to commit my own hours.
Awesome. Is there something in like particular that you kind of, are there some specific fields that you're looking at?
Yes. The notion of something bigger than my name is something that my CEO from Tembo Education, Phil Michaels, have always shared with me. And I do resonate with it quite a bit. So my goal right now is to be able to retire in a sense of not necessarily financially, because I don't think my mind will stop, but be able to dictate my own hours and be able to live financially in a comfortable level with those hours and get there between 35 and 40. Because by that time, Tembo Education would be around about like 15 years or so.
Okay.
10 years, 12 years or so. And what that will allow me to do is be able to see the longitudinal value, because we're in the education field, of seeing some of these kids that were 5 years old that we've actually impacted, and now they're 15 type of individuals that they've grown into.
Yeah.
Like, able to understand the type of inquisitive mindset we were able to give them and what they've turned it into as a knowledge machine. So it's just going to be a very interesting return on my time, effort, and money investment, seeing an individual grow up like that.
That's super incredible, and definitely speaks to your deep connection to education, right? To have that kind of patience and understand that you need to have that kind of persistence, like everybody says to see that big picture. So major kudos. Thank you so much, Sercan, for joining us. This is now your moment to plug. How can people get in touch with you and, potentially work with you?
Absolutely. I work with Fortune 500 companies. I consult on processes of sales, marketing, operations. And as you can imagine, and for those who have heard, I'm very much into making sure people and the planet in itself is more in harmony. So I have other startups and businesses that help with a circular economy, which is basically your impact on the planet, right? So any kind of those initiatives that you're working with and you're trying to get a better idea of what to do things and how to do things, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. It is literally just LinkedIn/my name, last name. You'll easily find me. I go by John just to make things easier for anybody that wants to say my name. And you can see that on LinkedIn too. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn for sure. That's how I keep my relationships in the start, especially from a professional standpoint. And you will see there too. I will take a general connection and see where it goes instead of holding myself off and waiting for a real connection to happen. So I'm open for everyone.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time today. It was really fantastic.
Thank you for having me on board, Elias. And we keep on talking. And